Good evening. Welcome to Slate School and our conversation entitled A Conversation with Nancy Carlsson-Paige about Defending the Early Years. As part of Slate School's commitment to education, we are delighted to present the Education Idea Lab, which is a unique virtual series that is free and open to the public. This thought-leading event convenes leaders and change makers and participants from all sectors of education and innovation. So thank you so much for joining us. We are thrilled to have you all with us. And my name is Julie Mountcastle, and I'm head of school at Slate School. So I'll briefly introduce you to Slate School, and then we're going to hear from our remarkable guest. Slate School is an independent 501c3 nonprofit elementary school where education is focused on cultivating creativity, fostering ingenuity, and is really inspiring a deep passion for lifelong learning. At Slate School, we formed a community that is constantly striving to improve practice, to create meaningful educational experiences for learners of all ages, and frankly, to change the landscape in education. Slate School convenes experts for important, authentic conversations about education, and these online dialogues, just like today's, are always free and open to the public. So we're eager to get started, but I do want to acknowledge that we again have viewers joining us from 6 continents. And here's why. Nancy Carlsson-Paige is Professor Emeritus at Lesley University, where she taught educators for over 30 years and was founder of the university's Center for Peaceable Schools. She co-founded Defending the Early Years, which is a nonprofit organization working for a just, equitable, and quality early childhood education for every young child. She is the author of many articles and books, including Taking Back Childhood, a proven roadmap for raising confident, creative, compassionate kids. Her writing focuses on media and technology, early childhood, peaceable classrooms, and education reform. She's spoken at many conferences, including the National Association for the Education of Young Children Conference, Project Renewal Ground Zero Conference, Center for Peaceable Schools, and National Association for the Education of Youth. And obviously, you can tell she's won many awards, including the Lifetime Achievement Award by the by the American Academy of Education, Arts and Sciences, the Peace Educator of the Year, and the Robert F. Kennedy Children Action Corps Award. So, hence, we have a lot of people tuning in. Welcome, Nancy, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Julie. It's an honor to be here, honor to be with you and be part of the series.
Thank you. Well, I want to kind of get right to it, and I would like to start with a question that I hope gives you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the evolution of defending the early years. You'd been an educator. What brought you to create that organization?
Actually, it was a sense of alarm about what was happening in early childhood education and being very in touch with teachers all across the United States who were distraught over the pressures entering their professional life based on externally imposed standards that were a reflection of education reform. And my colleagues Diane Levin and Ed Miller and I observed that the ed reform approach, which is standardized testing, data-driven, test-driven education, and focus on academics so narrowly, was pushing down to early childhood and influencing the quality of education in early elementary, kindergarten, and preschool. And it was alarming to us. And we were, first we started just speaking at conferences about it and trying to raise awareness, but we realized we had to do something bigger. And so we reached out to a good number of really respected education leaders nationally in the US to form an advisory board, to form this organization where we would try to have a unified voice that advocated for the kind of early childhood education that we all understood is best for children. And what was happening in ed reform and then the creation of the Common Core standards was that policymakers, billionaires, people who don't know young children were actually determining education policy that was completely out of step with young children and what their needs are. And it was also upsetting that, for example, with the Common Core standards, there wasn't an early childhood professional or teacher designing those standards. So it was alarming to me to see more than 90 standards written down for kindergarten, which kindergartners are supposed to accomplish by the end of the school year, including learning to read, which is ridiculous and completely out of step with their development. And so we started, trying to organize, bring people together. There were many early childhood educators feeling the same way. So we had a meeting to sort of get ourselves off the ground. We started writing white papers and op-eds and reports, and taking various steps that we've taken through the years, and still have to advocate for how children learn best through interaction, play, and social, relationships with teachers and each other. Also, we've wanted to keep in touch with what's happening in the society at large, because we know that children take in what's happening around them. They hear about it because their parents are talking, siblings are talking, older kids, they hear about it in the media. There's so much evidence to that. And so fortunately for us, one of our advisors is the child psychologist, Dr. Susan Lin, who not only is a psychologist, but she's an ace ventriloquist. And she has her puppet named Audrey Duck. And Audrey asks a lot of questions. She's around kindergarten, first grade age. Audrey's got a lot of questions and Susan answers them. So we made 2 videos about the pandemic, because Audrey was upset about not being able to go to school, upset about having to wear a mask. And Susan is explaining everything. Then when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening, and it was very much in the news and on the national mind, and many children were hearing about it, we made another video with Dr. Susan Lin and our co-director, Denisha Jones. And we went into territory that is new for us. We got good advisors, both Black and white educators, to look at the rough drafts of our video till we could hone it to a place where everyone thought we'd done the best job we could. But Audrey Duck in that case is asking, why are people protesting? And she even asks Denisha, I heard you say a word. It's racism. What is it? And Denisha tries to explain to Audrey what that is in terms that a young child would understand. And it's very touching. I mean, at one moment, Audrey says, I wonder if people would be mean to me because I'm an orange duck. Well, and Denisha answers it really well. But right anyway, all these 3 videos are examples of how we're trying to stay current and offer meaningful, substantial information of a caring nature to young children about questions they might be asking. We have a website that's where everything is free and downloadable, and we invite everyone to come and see all the things we offer, and to take these videos and use them in whatever ways you can, as a parent, as an educator, whatever.
Awesome. That's so great. And I want to say, really, were it not for this terrible pandemic, I don't know if we'd be having this conversation with people from 6 continents. And obviously there were many, many, many terrible things that happened during the pandemic, losses that can never be counted, right? But we do have an opportunity now through this technology to be together in this way. And it's so great for us, but is it great for kids? I mean, and in the parts that aren't great for kids, maybe, how do we walk that back, Nancy? How do we walk that back?
I'm definitely concerned about that. And I think as soon as we can walk it back, we should. The reason is I've written about this. When we understand how young children learn, which is actively using their bodies, using their senses, interacting, handling materials, social interaction, it's their whole selves. And brain development is such that, babies are born with about a little more than a quarter of the adult's size brain in size and volume. By the time they're 5, it's 90%. So that growth of the brain in those 5 years, it occurs as a result of experience. If kids weren't having any experience, the brain synapses wouldn't be happening, the neurons wouldn't be connecting. It's all about experience. So I feel, even though we don't literally have research on it, using my child development understandings and what I know about the brain, it's inhibiting, it's limiting for children at a young age to be on the screen very much, because that's essentially a passive activity. Their whole body's not involved. Their actions, movements aren't involved. Their senses aren't involved. And I worry that they're getting short shrift by too much time.
And it's seductive. It's so seductive too.
That's a part of it that is a concern, because all the parents I know, all the young kids I know, the kids have gotten habituated to the screens at a really young age. They go for it. They want, it's entertaining. One fundamental difference, I think, between genuine learning and screen time is the screen is so entertaining. And it offers you a lot of stimulation, but it's of a different kind from the kind that you create from within as a child. When a child is pursuing an idea, problem solving with materials, asking questions that seem interesting and the child wants to go further with, those things aren't happening with the screen. The screen is actually much more in charge of the learning process and really often entertaining in order to keep kids involved, but it's stimulating in a way that makes kids want to return to it. And it's replacing in a worrisome way the kind of authentic, genuine, whole child learning that we know is optimal.
Yeah, I mean, it has, I will say to anybody, we were scratching our heads a little bit. We're a very low tech school here, Nancy. We don't have computers and iPads and things for kids. We don't do any of that. I have one projector here, and we say we use the projector as a window to wonder. So we watch, 5 or maybe 10-minute videos to see things that we couldn't normally see or that we couldn't explain.
Sure.
But I was scratching my head because we were actually depending on the computer for community. And community is the last thing that you get from the computer. And so I think it must be very confusing to young children because, it's the way we're staying in touch and seeing each other. And yet it is not fulfilling. So I don't know. You have a wonderful article in Defending the Early Years about this very thing, children learning in the digital age, and I encourage everybody to read it. And it just so clearly points out so many things that I think as educators we know, but I think there are a lot of people that don't recognize that play really is this essential piece. You talk about building with blocks in the article, and I think that's maybe you could talk a little bit more about what kinds of things are happening for little kids, right, when they're building with blocks.
Yeah, the contrast is stark because by its very nature, computer learning, or actually there's a horrendous thing called online pre-K. That's a misnomer, but it's in many states are adopting it instead of quality preschool education, I think for budget reasons, so that they can say they're offering preschool, but it's a really lame substitution for it. Most of the online programs that children are accessing, by their nature, they have to focus on rote learning and focusing on right and wrong answers. Whereas in constructivist education, children are building their ideas through activity and experience. So if we imagine kids in the block area, for example, when we watch them, it's a thrill because they are active, engaged. they're stacking the blocks, they're building buildings, they're comparing the sizes, they're matching them, they're classifying them into sizes and groups. As they play, as they create a farm, that's all happening. And all of that is actually sort of precursor learning to understanding math, because the whole concept of understanding number is a very complicated one. And it's silly in a way, but even in the Common Core standards, one of the requirements is kids can count to 100 by tens. I mean, you can memorize how to do that. You can just sit there and say 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and someone checks it off. That doesn't mean the child understands number, because number is a concept. So let's say if you have 5 marshmallows and 5 giraffes and 5 pennies, they look different. To a younger child, the child would think the giraffes are more because they're judging based on space. But it's only through experience with the materials and in life that humans eventually realize, oh, wait, there's a constancy to number that's separate from the material. It's not embedded in the material. And it's only through experience that one can figure that out. We all figured it out at some time in our youth. But the computer learning doesn't allow for the pre-number concepts to get built in the first place that would come from building materials, blocks, and all the other experiences we offer in a really high quality play-based early childhood program.
Yeah, and I think it makes for a rocky foundation if we don't have that.
You know, the thing is, it looks good. This is what's scary, because if you test preschool, I've visited programs where kids in preschool and kindergarten are getting tested beginning of year and end for knowing to write their numbers, for example.
Right.
It doesn't mean that they understand, but they might get checked off, and the program might get funding because the kids were succeeding at those questions, but it doesn't, not laying a foundation that's going to allow them to understand or appreciate math as things get more difficult. It's not a solid foundation because it's a thin, memorized bunch of symbols that don't have deep meaning in terms of at a conceptual level.
Yeah, I think I actually, our school here is project-based, and I actually have a student who's studying the history of numbers. He's in 3rd grade, and he's interested in the history of numbers. And it's so interesting to watch him make the connections with the idea that number was created as a way for us to write down what we know about the quantity of things.
Exactly.
And how there were so many different ways to write numbers, and there have been many different ways, and it's evolved over time. And I think a danger of number is that we think it's this finite thing. We think, oh, we'll teach this thing and this thing and this thing, but they don't resonate if they don't have that foundation. So
you're talking about it. Did you just say 3rd grade?
Yes. Yes.
That's a child more dynamic thinking and more able to think about the different ways that we could conceptualize numbers, which is beautiful and brilliant, because we've gotten so locked into this really narrow, culturally defined set of standards that we think that we say it means learning has happened, and it just is just not the case.
Yeah, but it's hard to make a case for this idea that learning is always happening, and I think that the data is so clear that we need this play, we need this constructivist attitude toward learning if we want children to continue to learn their whole lives long. And yet we say it, people nod, people agree. It feels right in people's bellies. When you say this to them, when you have a conversation with someone, and yet we're still trying to get this to take hold sort of universally.
It's been really a puzzle and a challenge to advocate for young children and for the ways that they learn through play and activity. because most adults have forgotten that. They have a different idea about learning. They remember learning, but it's much later in life than when they were little. And also, for a whole range of reasons, I think as a collective adult group, we're not as good at observing children and just seeing what they're doing and understanding the value of it without judging it, evaluating it, wanting it to achieve something that we've defined, rather than understanding what's happening for them. How are they making sense of the world as they play with blocks, as they do imaginary play? You know, we're interpreting it through our own eyes and our own desires, if you will, rather than letting all that go and just appreciating that real learning is happening. When children are playing, it's very hard for adults to see the learning. But if we looked more carefully and tried to actually talk to each other about it and recognize it, we would see it, because it's happening all the time. All the time kids are playing wherever they are. Learning is going on.
I used to have a poster in my classroom where, you know, it described basically the major brain function growth that was happening at the play table, at the dress up station, at the blocks area. And I don't know whatever happened to that, but I should resurrect it wherever it is, because it actually did sort of make transparent those important moments.
That's wonderful. And you know, with as children are coming back to in-school learning, you know, they've had a wide range of different experiences in the pandemic, a huge range. And for some kids, there's been the trauma of illness, of loved ones, and death of loved ones. They've had all kinds of experiences. We're going to need, as educators, to look really carefully at what has happened for them and what is coming up for them in their play and how they talk, in order for us to offer curriculum that's going to help them heal and grow from this pandemic experience. We have to really understand what they've been through, which they can show us, because children do all the time. It's our ability to see it and bring it into the curriculum in the way that we need to. I observed a kindergarten teacher in the Boston Public Schools a number of years ago. And she had a really inclusive classroom, a totally sense of safety and trust among the kindergartners. And they had morning meeting every morning, and kids could say whatever they wanted. And one Monday morning, this little boy, Carlos, I visited this classroom numerous times, said in the meeting, "My parents were fighting over the weekend and it scared me." And a lot of teachers would have shut that down right there. You know, maybe they talked to Carlos on the side later or something. This teacher understood that probably most kids in that room had heard their adults fighting. She did a whole curriculum around it. She put at the easel, you know, the words angry, sad, fighting. She set up the block area so kids could act out what would they do when you hear people fighting. At the writing area, she wrote, "How do I feel when I hear fighting?" They had a whole big class book about it. She let the parents know what she was doing and why she was doing it. And it was a really insightful and brave way to deal with some hard issue that a child brought up in class in front of other kids. Mm-hmm. And it was brought up in the first place because the kid trusted enough in the class to be able to talk about what mattered to him.
Right, and that would have been shattered if she had said, "Oh, let's talk about that later."
Yeah,
right?
or move on to another kid and pretend it wasn't said.
Yeah, it's suddenly unimportant. But what it took to say that, and what it took to build the confidence to say that in that room, well, you know what? That's the joy of actually having the time to listen to children and change everything based on what comes up that day.
This was a public school teacher.
Amazing.
And it was before the heavy pressure of Common Core, but still there was standards pressure, and she was creating an environment that was addressing the needs of whole kids. I've spent now so many decades in classrooms, and I've seen how kids when they are allowed to, I mean, after the Twin Towers attack, for example, the building in classrooms of towers and crashing them down and flying planes into them, and the drawing of the buildings and the planes and dictating, kids were working out all the stress and trauma that they had experienced just from seeing it on TV or hearing adults talk. But there are many, many examples I have in my collection of how capable children are of working out fears, confusions, upsets from the environment or in their own personal life, like Carlos, if we can provide them with that kind of environment. Now everyone's talking about learning loss. That idea of learning loss is it's stemming from this narrow definition that comes from the ed reform of the last couple decades of what education is.
Yes.
Learning loss means you don't remember the numbers you learned in kindergarten, you know?
Right.
But if you really learn numbers in block building, you don't forget it.
Right.
So, and also learning loss is not encompassing, I think, the needs children are going to have when they come back to school, and that we educators need to make room for. Absolutely.
And I think I don't know. I think there's no equity in it, actually, because no child is not learning. It doesn't matter where they are. And this idea that they have to be in a building or in front of a teacher or in front of a screen to be learning, they're learning all the time.
Yeah.
And what they're learning might be how to cook with grandma or how to take the subway to be with somebody else because, mom and dad have to work, or how to look after your brothers and sisters, or how to, 1,000 things. And we should be careful not to devalue that experience. Learning is not just about the numbers that, someone teaches you. Learning is something that's happening all the time. We say school is wherever you are.
There was a study that came out from University of Virginia that showed the radical changes in kindergartens in the last, 20 years, and validated that kindergartens today have become first grades. They're not play-based. There's very less child choice, less play, less arts, more workbooks, more teacher direction, more homework. And that's happening more in low-income neighborhoods for children of color. So I think the equity issue is huge on this, because these standards are getting imposed on lower income kids more. Wealthier, your school is wonderful in the equity strivings that you do, but a lot of private schools that wealthier parents can afford, kids are going to great play-based preschools and kindergartens in all kinds of Reggio Emilia and all kinds of schools. And then if you are lower income and you are publicly funded, you're in this strict environment that's standards based and test based. And then you see the expulsions and rates of Black kids, so high, even in preschool, or suspension rates. And these things are connected.
Yes.
How the curriculum is done and how the environment is created and how children feel in it is very connected to how they behave.
Absolutely. Well, you've been a teacher of teachers too.
Yeah.
I think the art of teaching is, has largely been pushed aside. Teachers, wonderful humans who go into this field filled with enthusiasm and recognition of their own individual and beautiful gifts for teaching children, are being asked more and more to, focus on this box or this box, because it's proven to get your kids from A to B. And it's a lie. And I feel like those teachers who are struggling in those situations, I empathize with them. They really have a hard time telling kids that learning is everywhere and school is wonderful when they're being boxed in just like the kids are.
The numbers of teachers leaving the field, the statistics are very high, and it's very worrisome. And when these changes, ed reform standards first got imposed, a lot of teachers left the field early, and they still are. And one of the things I observe is that many younger teachers haven't been trained in play-based education, sadly, and they have had, they actually often think, especially if they had alternative pathways like Teach for America or some other alternative pathway into teaching, they actually think they're doing a good job when they're doing this rote-based instruction, because they don't know how kids learn and what they need in the early years. We have a big job in education, both to change the consciousness of all adults and parents, but also to really try to reach for quality learning for young people so that they have a chance in life, so that they can love learning and that they can build on the learning as the years go by.
Yeah, it is a big job. And yet, again, I'll say that I meet very few people who don't agree that it needs to be that way. Even parents sometimes who come, and visit our school, and they're uncertain about it. And truly, very few people have had the kind of education that we offer here at Slate School, project-based. We're in a big plot of nature here, 25 acres. And, we're outside all the time looking at worms and woolly bear caterpillars and things like that. It's not something that people are accustomed to, but they respond to it positively because it makes sense in the body. And teachers who want to do this kind of teaching, they want to do this kind of teaching because it feels right in the body.
Yeah.
And it's challenging. I mean, I'm unlearning things every day. I'm really trying to, do better work. And we talk all the time about how do we step back when we're observing kids and really remove ourselves from the equation. And I think this is hard for parents. I know it was hard for me as a parent to watch my child and simply observe what was happening instead of having it all caught up with, oh, I should have taught her that. Oh, I wish she knew that. If I told her that yesterday, she, all of those kinds of self, accusing voices. How do we step away from that? How do we do it?
The wonderful Bill Crane, who's on our advisory board and spoke in one of your series.
He did.
And he wrote an op-ed about this idea, and he mentioned it when he did the interview with you. But he has a sanctuary for, animals that need rescuing and to be cared for. They wouldn't survive in the environment. And they open it up, he and his wife, on Sundays for visitors. I don't know if you remember this, but he has an op-ed that we put on our website, because to me, it's so profound that the children come and they see the chickens and the cows. And
I do remember it. Yes.
And they're full of wonder. And Bill said it worries him because he sees that the parents miss it. They don't see the wonder. And they're saying, Lucy, what does the rooster say?
Yes.
And, what does the chicken say? Hi to the chicken. And all of these, and what is that? If we could understand in ourselves, what are we doing when we do that? Because there's some yearning in us as parents where we're always trying to get the kid to know more, to be better. Well, what if we let go of that and just enjoyed being with kids and watch them and let them play and trust that they are learning. Play is learning in the early years, and yes, they need adults. It's not like we don't exist. We have an important role, but what it is much more complex than a simple direct teaching role where you're just getting kids to learn a string of numbers or something. It's an art, and it takes a lot of education, experience, and insight to know how to observe children, to know what you're seeing, and to trust it, and then build curriculum from it. Because ideally, if we build curriculum from children's interests, they're going to be into it. They're going to love it. They're going to learn from it.
You're absolutely right. You're so right. And it's funny because I'll say, we interview a lot of teachers here at Slate School, and early childhood teachers really, they have it together.
Yeah.
They really do know how to observe, because a lot of times their children, the children that they spend their day with, they may be, nearly nonverbal. You really have to watch them to understand who they are, what they need, and where to go next. And I think we could all use a dose of that as we go on to teach in older grades, because it's not really different. It's not really different. We think it's different, but it's not different.
No, we always have to stay in touch with the learner. And how is the learner learning? What questions is the learner asking? What are the learner's interests? And try to meet children and young people where they are, instead of imposing on them where we expect them to be. And unfortunately, the whole idea of standards and data-driven instruction has emanated from the false idea that we should be doing that. And there isn't a way for a young person, most of them anyway, to learn to love learning in that kind of a situation. I have a lot of grandkids. I mean, the ones who went to schools where they were getting imposed with standards like that just wanted to get the heck out of there. It wasn't fun. And they really were not happy.
Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs. I want to talk about something in your book. So first I want to recommend it because, I read a lot of books from.
It looks like you've read it rather well, rather thoroughly. Wow.
Yeah. There are a lot of things in here, and what I love about it is that it really is what it says it is, a proven roadmap. I read a lot of these books, and they're wonderful, and I get a lot out of them. I really enjoy it, and we talk about them at our school, and the Idea Labs are so incredible. But in your book, you at the end of each chapter, where you talk very eloquently about all the topics and the things that you've seen and the data that you've come across, and then at the end you say, here's what you can do. Here's what you can do. Yeah, and it's manageable. It doesn't feel like something that's out of the realm of possibility for anybody. And I think that's unique in your book. Mm-hmm. So I hope people will find their way to it. But I want to ask you, you talk about a child you call Brian.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe you'll explain who Brian was. But I think if I'm remembering right, Brian is the one that's in a power dynamic. He's in a power struggle. Is that right? Yeah. Am I thinking of the right one?
I used the example of Brian, and he is Brian, though I can't say more about who exactly he is.
Right,
but
of course.
I was in the park. I'm so sensitive to people's privacy.
Yes, that's great.
I was in a park with him, and I was the adult in charge. And this is a park near my house, and he went running in the park, and he barreled into this little girl who was around 2, and he knocked her over. He saw he knocked her over, and he kept running. So I ran after him, like, Brian. And the more I ran, the faster that kid ran, until I finally got him all the way across the park. And I said, Brian, I want to talk to you. And he goes, I don't want a timeout. And I said, I'm not giving you a timeout, but let's go find out how that little girl is that you knocked over. And I took him by the hand. We went over there. Her mom had helped her get up and dusted her off, and she was okay. And I said, how is she? Brian didn't say anything, but I said, how is she? And the mom said, thanks so much for coming over. She's better now. And I said, we really hope, she feels okay. But for me, it was an example of something Piaget, I learned from Piaget in reading his book on moral development. And this is a very profound concept, but the more that we punish kids, the less they learn to regulate themselves from within. So one of the questions we have to ask ourselves when we're thinking about discipline, that's such a big topic for everyone. What is our goal? Is our goal to get kids to comply with us and behave the way we want? Or is our goal to actually help them become aware of other people's feelings, of social skills, of ways we can interact with each other that help us build social relationships? And also, we want to stay connected to them. And, when we discipline kids too much, they get angry. They don't like it. They feel bad, and it puts a barrier between us. And my goal as a parent and a grandparent has been stay connected to these kids and let them know I'm on their side, and we can solve problems together. We can, just like Brian, we can look at this together. You don't have to run away from me. We can figure this out. We can go over there and find out how the little girl is. It's okay. There's a lot of room between harsh discipline and completely laissez-faire attitudes. I mean, those are kind of two ends of an extreme of how we use our power as adults. Neither one is really very helpful to kids. They need our guidance. They need our coaching, but it's a matter of how do we do it. And there's a big middle ground there where, as we understand more about our choices, because it's never just one or two options, there are many ways to handle things. And if we think of kids as collaborators with us, we are in charge. We know we are. But we can let them have as much power as they're capable of having in any given situation. And I think if that can guide us as we try to work with them to help them build social skills and awareness of other people, and hopefully empathy and compassion for others. And if they're harshly punished, they don't have those feelings. They're actually shutting down their feelings and just being plain old angry at us or at somebody.
Yeah, nobody does better when they feel bad.
No.
Nobody does
No,
better.
to have a generous spirit, you have to feel loved, and you have to have a sense of trust, and you have to know that when you express yourself, it's going to be safe.
It's a funny thing. I had a student teacher once, and she taught a lesson, and it went well. It was a lesson, just kind of by the book, an early teacher kind of, she's got her objective and she's going to do this and she's going to do this. And some things were kind of sideways, but it all went fine. And at the end, she said, we talked about her lesson and how the kids responded and everything. At the end, she said, but how was my classroom management? And I laughed. I said, I don't actually know what you're talking about.
Wow.
Because when you say classroom management,
yeah,
that's to me like a really negative term for, did the kids know you care about them?
That's so interesting you're saying that. In teacher education, there's commonly a course called classroom management. Yeah. And usually it's focusing on behaviorism.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. If kids know that you care about them, they're there to be a part of a community.
They respond very beautifully when they sense that you care, and also that you're in charge in a good way, not in a punitive authoritarian way, but they sense, in other words, we're not giving all the power to children. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about trusting them to work with us to solve problems in ways that benefit them and other people. And we have to be really creative in thinking about how can that work. And a lot of times they have ideas about that. Once I did a lot of work in conflict resolution, in kindergartens, I was shocked at how even preschoolers could come up with great solutions to conflicts on the playground, for example. Once we acted them out with puppets and things and asked for their ideas, they're eager to do what I would call social problem solving. In other words, kids love to feel competent.
Yes, I was just thinking they love to feel expert. Yes.
Yeah, and when they're building in blocks, they're thrilled because they made something they think is fantastic. when they're drawing, it's the same, but it's the same in social situations. They want to feel like they're successful in relationships with other people, and we want to help them feel that way.
Yeah, and Brian is a great example of that.
Yeah,
Brian is a great example of that. I could go a million places here, but I guess say again.
Feel free.
Okay. Well, I want to talk a little bit about what life is like at home right now for kids. And I don't have small kids anymore. My kids are 20 and 22, but I see it. I see in the world a lot of toys. I see a lot in the world, a lot of things, and I know you've written about this.
Yeah.
And I guess it would be great, I think, if we could have some guidance about when we're looking for toys for our children. Now, what does a really open-ended toy look like? And then, how much is too much?
No, those are really great questions. And something, I don't hear people ask them much anymore. Starting in the mid 80s, we had a big revolution in the toy industry because deregulation came in. Many industries under Ronald Reagan were deregulated, including the toy industry. So while it had been illegal before that to market toys directly linked to media, that restriction was lifted. Mm-hmm. So toy companies jumped in and started making whole lines of toys that were coordinated with G.I. Joe and Star Wars and My Little Pony and you name it. And that has gone on now for decades since, because there still are no restrictions. But what my colleague Diane Levin and I observed is that teachers started telling us when we would do national conferences, something's changing with children's play. It's not looking right. It's not looking like creative play anymore, or that it's theirs. They seem to be mimicking what they've seen on the screen that's then enhanced by playing with a toy that's a replica of the screen, and also it's a closed-ended toy. So they do a repetitive action. That's sort of the story they've seen on the screen, but that isn't play. That's imitation, really, of something. That's the opposite, in Piaget's terms, the opposite of play. Open-ended materials are ideal. I'm sure you know this, so it's good. Thanks for asking it. But open-ended materials are ones that children bring their own imagination to, their own stories, their own creative ideas. So it's Play-Doh, it's paint, it's blocks, it's building materials, it's all of the things that don't define the direction of the play. So the extent to which any toy does define the direction of the play, a Barbie doll, a Bratz doll, there's a lot of definition in the toy that's going to determine the direction of the play. So the extent to which we can get kids engaged with materials that are open-ended and they determine the direction of the play, that's when their inner life, their feelings, their fears, their past experiences can get expressed, can come out. And that's when teachers can see through play a window into each child. And that's especially what we need to do after the pandemic, is provide opportunities where children can show us through their play what's going on inside them. And it's very difficult to know what's going on inside a child who's playing with a super defined toy that's mimicking a TV show. We just don't see any of the child there.
Wow, that's great.
Also, I'm hoping, by the way, we're going to try to make another Audrey Duck video.
Oh, no kidding.
Thousands and thousands of people have been looking at these videos. We're really happy about that. So we're making one in July with Susan Lin of how Audrey feels about going back to school. And we're going to figure out the issues that would concern Audrey, and Susan will answer. But these are short little videos, like 8 minutes or something. But I imagine it as being a useful tool for teachers to show kids coming back to school in early childhood classrooms to initiate a conversation or play after looking at the video that might help them talk about anything they need to talk about this transition to go back, or what they bring with them as they go back. We're hoping it'll be a tool that will be widely used and helpful to people.
It seems like it would be very helpful, especially when I know for us here and certainly in my last environment for teaching, the home visit was such an important piece.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happens for some schools and some teachers when it comes to home visits going into next year. And it's probably never been more important.
I agree. I think home visits are wonderful for the teacher, for the parents, for the child. And I don't know in this environment how that's all going to unfold. That would be ideal. I mean, certainly to be in touch with parents and families is vital when kids, always, but when kids are young, especially. But also just remembering as early childhood educators that we have to really open the door for helping kids express what's inside.
Yes, yes. I just want to circle back to one thing that you talk about in the book in conflict resolution. And you talk about listening, active listening with the child, and then rephrasing what they say, rephrasing their story. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think that can be misunderstood, that idea.
Yeah, active listening can be thought of in a very superficial way, but I really think of it in a very deep way, because I mean listening, genuine listening from the heart, from the mind, with full presence. So when children are expressing something, an intense feeling, you know, the other day I saw an interaction between a father and a child. The child said, "I'm angry." The child was 5, and the father laughed. And I'm talking about acknowledging the genuine feelings that children show us and taking them seriously. So if a child says, "I'm angry," I think we need to say, "Tell me more," or "You just said you're angry. Tell me why you're angry," and listen. And the child might say, "I'm angry because I wanted to go to the park today." Well, then we do our best to rephrase what we heard. And we do that because the person talking to us feels heard and seen. If we just say back, "So you feel angry because you wanted to go to the park and we didn't go," and you just say what you heard. But for a lot of us, we want to fix it. We want to explain it. We want to say, "Well, we didn't go to the park because it's raining." Or, you know, we want to say, "Well, go tomorrow." You know, we do something.
Yeah,
that
you didn't want to put your coat on, so we couldn't go to the park. You know, all of a sudden,
a blame statement like that.
Yes.
But I'm saying there's an art form for parents and teachers and all of us. And it's not just with children, it's with each other too, that we actually practice the art of being present with people and not talking all the time and not trying to fix things and not trying to change things. But it's the Bill Crane idea really in this form, but it's to be present and listen. And it's powerful when people feel listened to. Something so powerful happens, something new that we never saw was coming, we couldn't have predicted, can happen if we can take those moments to really be there for that person.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that, you know, in terms of the people that we work with all the time. You know, it can be challenging as we move through the day.
Yeah,
we're busy, and you know, we're agreeing here tonight we have important work to do. But being sure to let your colleagues see that you're really listening to them, and perhaps letting the children that you work with see that you're really listening to your colleague.
Oh, absolutely. They can see that in adult relationships. And it has to do with trusting other people. we're in an era where there isn't a lot of trust among people. And I think ed reform, I hope viewers know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top and data-driven instruction, that we are not conveying a sense of trust in the learner when we impose so much on them that there's no space for them to have a voice about the learning process or the experiences they're having. It's a horrible mistake we've done the last 20 years in education. We've shut kids out, and we've really diminished the opportunity for them to learn to love the learning process. I so want us to get that back.
Well, you're helping.
I hope so.
No, I know it. I know it. You're helping. And, I'm thinking about ways that we can help too. What are some things we can do? How can we participate in this? I know you've got some ideas for me.
There's one big thing I do want to mention. People talk a lot about Finland and the phenomenal education approach in Finland, but I want to underscore something that isn't said very often. They brought their child poverty rate down. And the context in which we are doing education is really critical. Finland brought their child poverty rate down to 3%. The United States has one of the highest child poverty rates of all developed countries in the world, 21%. We can't provide equal, just, quality education to children until we deal with that, because the inequities are so great from birth that by the time kids get to us in school, it's not a level playing field, and they haven't had a fair start, a lot of them. So a big thing we can do is to do whatever people feel they can in the larger society around economic and social justice issues that are going to provide a context for education to also be more equal and just. And then I think on the smaller scale, we can try to implement justice values in our schools. I know you're already doing that very much, but a lot of schools aren't. A lot of schools are completely top-down, authoritarian. It's frustrating for teachers because I know a lot of them, I've talked to many of them who want to have much greater voice in curriculum development than they're able to, because some administrators coming in on Thursday to see if they're on page 17 of the book. It's so happening way too much. And that has to do with mistrust. But that's all a reflection of an education reform movement that's built on mistrust of children and children's learning and the faith that they know how to learn. You realize they know how to learn from the time they're born, and they're learning all the time from the time they're born.
What they learn from 0 to 5. Right?
They don't need the teacher to teach them. They're doing it.
Yes. Nancy, I've said a lot of times, and I don't mean to be putting it on the parents, but I do think if parents understand this and have confidence in this kind of meaningful education, that they can have such an important voice in changing what's happening. The child is the end consumer, but the parents facilitate that. And I am so lucky here. I have a community of parents who are so excited about their children's real growth and learning. And I think that people, other parents exposed to this kind of learning would feel the same, but we have to empower them. We have to let them know that their voice means something in their school district, and they can advocate for this kind of education.
Exactly. And we want to relate to parents in ways that are culturally and racially sensitive.
Yes.
Where we respect their family values and their culture, and we may have to do a lot of dialoguing and listening to each other to be able to move towards this kind of education, because people have different perspectives about it, and we can't tell people what to think. Right. We have to respect them from where they're at and try to have a dialogue where we try to express what we understand about how children learn, but we can't impose it.
Then we're no better than what we've got.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't really help. I have one last question for you out of a million that I'd
Yeah.
really like to keep asking. And that is, who else do you recommend we talk to here? Who are some folks that you like to talk to or that you listen to, that we might be able to have a conversation with?
Do you know our co-director, Denisha Jones?
I don't.
Well, she's wonderful. She made the Audrey video on racism.
Yes.
And she has a law degree and an early childhood degree. She's a very talented, insightful person. She's a wonderful co-director and a real leader in education.
Great.
In fact, I don't know how much time I have, but I'm going to say really quickly, we have okay. The early childhood field has a strong foundation in anti-bias work.
Mhm.
And a lot of us have really built that work out of children's questions and how children see things. Denisha and some of her Black educator colleagues have helped me to start to see that with some topics, and race is one of them, we have to talk to children in a way where we introduce concepts. And it's a matter of how we do it. Not that it's right or wrong, but there's ways to do it. There's a new book actually called Our Skin for young kids. It's a first discussion on race.
Mm-hmm.
We had a webinar of 5 Black early childhood educators called Black Lives Matter in Early Education. It's on our website.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth watching. But they have made me aware that young children, they're growing up in a racist society. They absorb racism. And I've always thought, well, they don't really understand racism until they cognitively can. But I understand now, kids are expressing racism when they're very little, in a play area, in a block area. They're discriminating against a darker child and saying you can't play that role or you can't play with us. So now the question for me becomes, how do we talk with teachers about how to intervene in situations like that? And how do we help teachers introduce ideas about race that are developmentally appropriate and meaningful to young kids, but we don't just ignore it? And I think the Black Lives Matter movement has helped me and many of us see that we have to be more proactive on this subject. It's something we're working on, but Denisha, our co-director, is actually working, spearheading a project on this that we hope to disseminate in the next year.
Wow. Where
we can help teachers begin to grapple with these issues about living in a racist society, because that is where we live. And that's where kids are growing up. And so we can't really pretend that's not our world. It is right now. And we see it more plainly now than we ever have. So anyway, she's someone I'd love to have you include, and you would be most happy to have her, I'm quite sure.
Yes, we would.
There's another educator of color, Keisha Reed, who's on our advisory board. Uh-huh. And she has a play-based nonprofit. I think it's called Discovery Learning. But you can find both of you can look at our board of advisors and see a lot of outstanding people. But these are 2 Black educators I would recommend dialogue with you who have a lot to say.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Nancy, I can't tell you how, you know what, you lived up to every expectation I had, and that wasn't easy.
Oh, wow. I'm honored. Thank you. That makes me feel really good.
Well, I just, it's a wonderful opportunity to be a part of one of these conversations. And I can't ever say enough how much I appreciate the time and just the opportunity to talk to you, because it's the tip of the iceberg, on what you've done, but it makes a world of difference for us. And, these conversations this year have been the best professional development I've ever had in my whole life. And I think it's led to some really good conversations among the faculty and families here and people sort of worldwide. It's been quite remarkable to us and humbling and exciting that we could have conversations with people so far afield.
You know what, it's one of the benefits of COVID that a lot of us have been doing things on the internet that a wider audience of people can participate in and think about. And this is something I hope we don't lose as we come back to in-person situations, because there is a learning benefit that has come to many, many people. Many people are probably listening to this today who wouldn't have been able to come to a talk
Absolutely.
at their school, but they can tune in. And plus it's probably something they can listen to. It is something that they can listen anytime.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Send it to someone else. So these are great benefits that I hope help people become more aware about children. That's my goal.
Well, it's a great goal, and I have it. I share it with you. So I just say good night to everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. We end our meetings at Slate School in kind of a kooky way. We just offer each other positive rice. And so, Nancy, I'd offer you some positive rice tonight.
Oh, wow. Back to you.
Thank you. I feel it. And I'd offer it to everybody watching. And I hope you have a wonderful evening and look forward to seeing you at another Idea Lab soon. Thanks again, Nancy. You were amazing.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you so much for a great conversation.
Come visit us. We'd love to have you.
I'd love to.
Okay. All right. We'll be in touch.
Okay.
Take
Bye.
care.